No, okay. You know what? I'll let him explain. Please welcome Mr. Oskar Simmons to the podium.
I took this class with very little knowledge of what it actually entailed. I heard project and freedom of choice and thought, hey, that sounds like my kind of party. Ever since I was small, I've loved making things with my hands. I would carve sticks into swords, beat metal broom handles into swords, cut the arms of my mom's couch, get in trouble, make garden stakes into swords. You get the idea. But this love of creating has stayed with me my whole life. My favorite parts of school have always been the art classes, and this seemed like it would be a fun art class with a bit of extra effort. I heard something about a presentation at the end, but that was in the future, which meant two things. It doesn't exist, and I don't need to care about it. It took a while to settle on a project idea, and by a while, I mean I started thinking about it before school started, and settled sometime in February. What I came up with was this. I was going to make wooden bowls on a lathe. To those of you who heard the title of my speech, Going Bowling, and expected to hear about lanes, balls, and pins, I'm sorry. Or you're welcome, whichever. All I needed now was a mentor. For an introvert like me, this seemed like a daunting task. I have to speak to a real person face to face. My worst fears had been realized. But if I was going to get this project done, I would need some outside help. Whether it was luck, fate, or all of the above, the perfect mentor was right under my nose. Rich Shao is a housemaster at the dorm, which made setting up meetings extremely easy. More importantly, he shares my interest in woodcraft and has a large workshop full of tools, the definitive man's playground. Our first step was Mr. Shao showing me around his workshop. I needed to be somewhat familiar with all the woodworking tools I would have at my disposal so that I could be as independent as possible in the shop. Most importantly, he showed me the lathe. That first day, I got some practice on a piece of boxwood. My first time on the lathe was fun, if a little nerve-wracking. From that point on, Mr. Shao took me to his workshop for about 3 hours twice a week. Originally, I planned to make 3 to 5 bowls, but I managed to make 6, as well as a service piece. For those who might not know, a lathe is a machine built to spin things really fast for easy removal of material. The one you see here belongs to Mr. Rich Shao, my mentor, and it is also the one I used to create most of my bowls. To use it, you choose one of about 1 million types of chisels. You poke the wood, rotating at dangerously high speeds, and hope nothing hits you in the eye. Before much time at all, my first bowl was finished. It is made of walnut, and I can't really claim it as entirely my own. I received a good amount of help from a friend of my mentor's, Seth Odner. Mr. Shao doesn't specialize in bowl turning, but Seth does, so I figured Seth could give us some pointers. My next bowl was this one. This bowl is a bit special because it's the first one I made myself, all the way from designing on paper to polishing. The 3 kinds of wood from bottom to top are maple, cherry, and walnut. This bowl required a planer to make sure the planks in each section were the same thickness. There were some complications during the turning due to chipping, because I measured it a bit wrong myself. However, with a few repairs, the bowl came out well, and it taught Mr. Shao and I a few lessons about joining boards properly. Carving a piece made up of different types of wood proved interesting because of the differing properties wood can have. Maple is hard and requires decent pressure to cut. Cherry is soft and requires light pressure. When these two are right next to each other, it becomes difficult to maintain an even curve across the entire surface. Walnut is similar to cherry, but seen to chip more easily under the chisel, in my experience. Next came this triplet set. Twins. These went through a few different stages before I settled on this final design. Originally, I had planned to leave each piece of wood rectangular, like a pyramid with steps. However, I realized this design was pretty uncomfortable to touch, so I changed it to slant-sided pyramids, as you can see here. These are made of 2 pieces of walnut with cherry in the middle. They needed the least amount of lathe work, the most amount of home hours, and also the greatest amount of self-motivation. They sat in my dorm room for literal weeks, but I managed to finish hand sanding them all in the end. During those weeks, I made this natural edge bowl. It was suggested by Mr. Shao to bring some diversity to my collection. It was difficult to shape because of the irregular outer edge, and I certainly shredded my fingers a little bit. Last but not least is my service piece. It is made of boxwood and is a goblet. It has the logo of my club, Phi Alpha, as well as our motto, Mane and Vero, which means remain in truth. I hope to have this club placed in the Phi Alpha club room to act as a decoration alongside all the other countless memorabilia. Each time I finished a bowl, I would come up with an idea for 2 or 3 new bowls for the next meeting. Of all the art pieces I have ever made, these bowls are my favorites. They're certainly the most completed pieces I have. Senior Project has been a great creative outlet that I am very glad I did not miss. In fact, I believe that was one of the most important parts of the whole class for me. I can say that with certainty because last year I didn't have anything quite like this, and the difference has been huge. Living in the dorm is fun, but it is very easy to let yourself become creatively stifled. And last year, I felt that pretty badly. Now, it's a totally different story. My confidence in my own skill as a craftsman has honestly never been higher. I was relatively sure I wanted to go to school for craftsmanship before, and now I'm positive. There is very little doubt in my mind that I will be doing craft for a living. My point is this. Senior Project provided me with a priceless opportunity to test and reinforce my resolve in what I want to do. The specific project I chose wasn't really important. I could have done wooden spoons, a chessboard. For a while, I wanted to make yet another sword. All of these things would have given me the chance to express myself artistically as I experienced the reality of what it is like to do what you love with consequences for failure. Every time I stepped into the workshop, I got the feeling that this is where I want to be in the future. Thanks to this class, now I also have an idea of what I want to be. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
What kind of wood was the natural under that?
This is cherry.
Oh, cherry. All cherry. Oh, just one.
Yes.
Where did you get the wood?
Where did I get the wood? A lot of it for these 4 was donated by Mr. Boyce. This was already mostly made by Seth Odner. And these 2 were donated by my mentor, Mr. Shao.
types of new power tools did you use, and which was the most difficult to master?
How many types of new tools did I use, and which was the hardest? Well, pretty much everything I used was new. The lathe would be the hardest one. I used like a lathe, a bandsaw, a planer, hand planer, sanding stuff, a lot of things. Yeah. On all the bowls, probably around a little less than 40 hours.
I was wondering if you could explain how it attaches to the lathe and how it's
Oh, sure. How do I attach my bowls to the lathe? There are actually a lot of different ways you can do it. This method is called between centers. This piece pushes in here, and it can't move because it's locked between two centers. For all my bowls, I used what is called a chuck, which basically I expand it or contract it. So I would have a big piece of wood that I would cut a hole into and expand the chuck into inside and use just the pressure of that to hold it in place. And then when it's spinning, the centrifugal force pretty much centers it. Yes.
So what are you going to do with the hunk of wood that you didn't finish sawing from Lincoln's field?
Unfinished pieces. Well, that's a good question. I don't have, right. Yes.
Are you going to make any swords?
I hope so. Am I going to make any swords? Yeah, hopefully. Thank you.
All right, so same thing as before, refreshments, portfolios, intermission.